Jesus' sake. Amen. So today's the first Sunday of a new year. And I wonder if you're sitting here having already broken a New Year's resolution. Are you? Have you made a New Year's resolution that you've already managed to break? It's only the 3rd of January. What did you promise yourself? What have you set up for yourself? Have you set yourself any goals, any aspirations, any hopes, any dreams for 2016? Anything? Maybe we could have a chat over a cup of tea afterwards. What about, though, in regards to your faith? I wonder if that's something you've ever thought. In regard to your walk with Jesus, you set yourself any goals, any aspirations for 2016? I ask you the question because it is fascinating, certainly in my own life. I don't know whether you can relate to this, but I often make New Year's resolutions about a pile of other things. But I don't often, if I'm honest, make New Year's resolutions about my faith. And that got me to thinking. If I were to start making a list of things that I would want to do in 2016, what would it include? What would be my priorities? What would be on my wish list? What would I want to make a resolution about? And then that got me to thinking deeper. It's the problem, isn't it? Once you start mulling these things over in your head. I started to think about, well, what are our Christian priorities? What is this all about? What are we engaged with? I guess we pretty much all agree that love has to be a priority for us as a bunch of people, as a bunch of Christians. We're called upon to love people, love the world, and love this community. I hope that will be a significant part of our praying this coming week when we're together, rather than pointing the finger at the woes and misdemeanors of society. Rather, we will love on people and love this world for whom Christ died. Well, love has to be a priority. I suppose we'd agree that worship has to be a priority. That's something we as the Christian church should be engaged in corporately, and it's something that individually we should be doing and engaged with. Yeah, love, worship, these things have to be priorities. But I want to talk to you this evening about evangelism. Because we don't hear much these days about evangelism. But I really do believe that evangelism must be a priority for us, personally, and indeed as a fellowship. And with all the talk and prayers that are being offered up now regarding the possibility of a second worker, we must look at all of that in the context of evangelism, mission, outreach, how we can spread the good news of Jesus Christ. Because here's my guess. Some of us, if not most of us, find it actually quite difficult to talk about our faith. We don't naturally communicate what has happened in our lives when we're sitting down with friends, family, or colleagues. The Times reporter newspaper based in New Philadelphia reported a celebration that had taken place in a New Orleans public pool. This is a true story, friends. This is a genuine article from that paper. And you'll see it says, unclothed man drowns at lifeguard party celebrating drowning-free summer. Celebration at a New Orleans public pool was held to celebrate the first summer in living memory when a drowning had not occurred at that pool. In celebration of the occasion, 200 guests gathered, including 100 certified lifeguards. Everybody was having a great time until, as the party was breaking up and the lifeguards on duty began to clear the pool, they found a fully dressed body in the deep end. They tried desperately to revive the 31-year-old male, Jerome Moody, but it was too late. He drowned, surrounded by lifeguards, celebrating a successful season in the pool. It's a tragic story. But it got me to thinking. It got me to thinking how much more tragic it is that people I meet, people you meet, people we meet as a church every single day of our lives, members of our families, workmates, colleagues, fellow students at college or university, for all that we profess about Jesus, for all that we sing and pray about in here, in this lovely chapel week by week, they actually have no idea about what it's all about. And are, to use the old language, lost and heading for a Christless eternity. Does that worry you? How is that possible? See, like the lifeguards in New Orleans, the problem is we can spend so much time basking in the glory of Jesus, celebrating everything that happens here, our own successes, and become so consumed with ourselves, we actually neglect to share the good news of Jesus with anybody else. After all, that's what happens abroad. That's where mission belongs. Oh, we'll commission George to go off to India and do it for us. Lovely. That's evangelism. That's what it's about. And yet, as you'll see if you look in your newsletter, I've tried to write a little piece in there about Pen y Bryn, suggesting that mission doesn't just happen abroad. It actually happens here in Wales, where we live. And it happens in our neighbourhoods, in your street, amongst your family, your friends. It's very important that we understand just what all of this is about. It's important because, no doubt, when you think of an evangelist, you probably think of somebody like this guy. This is Billy Sunday, well known, and he, I guess, would typify how many people would understand the average evangelist. Hair that's been covered with a full tub of Brill cream. How do you think I lost most of mine? Toting a red letter Schofield King James version of the Bible that's big enough to hit you over the head with and bang you into eternity, let alone than anything else. Stomping around, pointing his finger, snorting, shouting, sweating, spitting all over the place, telling you that if you don't change your ways, you're doomed and you'll bust hell wide open. Well, I guess that kind of imagery is what's put us off. But the fact of the matter is, you know, every morning when you get up and you look in the mirror, you should see an evangelist. Every morning, fellas, when we're having a shave or picking our nose hair or whatever it is you want to do. Ladies, when you're there looking after your hair and sorting your earrings out. Every time we look in the mirror, we look into the face of an evangelist. If you're a Christian, if you claim to follow Jesus, you have a very simple responsibility. My boss has had a lovely poster on the office wall when I was working for the Baptist Union, and it said, "The Great Commission is a command, not a suggestion." And I'm challenged by that in my own life. That every day I am commanded to share Jesus with people. Simply to tell others what Jesus has done for me. And I think it's interesting, isn't it, that both Trevor and certainly Sylvia in her prayer here at the table talked about the change that has happened in a lot of our lives. I'm not sure where some of you might stand with all of this and Christianity and Jesus and your relationship with God and stuff like that. But, for many of us, we would say, we've had an encounter with Christ. We have met with him and we have known what it's like to be transformed and our lives have been changed. We would use language like that. And we would come to communion and we would eat bread and we would drink wine and, yes, it's so deeply significant and meaningful. Is it? Really? When's the last time you talked to somebody about your faith? About the difference that Jesus has made in your life? For some of us, it's a very, very long time ago. This evening, I want us to look at an incident from Jesus' life that illustrates perfectly what we are called to do for Jesus if we say we love him and follow him. It's about a guy who was so greatly impacted and completely, amazingly transformed by Jesus that he goes and tells others what happened to him. And Beth's going to come and read to us that incident. And if you're looking for it, it's in Marc chapter 5. Thanks, Beth.
This reading is taken from Mark chapter 5, verses 1 to 21, and can be found in the NLT Bible. Jesus heals a demon-possessed man. So they arrived at the other side of the lake, in the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out from a cemetery to meet him. This man lived among the burial caves and could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrists and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night he wandered among the burial caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. When Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him, ran to meet him, and bowed low before him. With a shriek he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside this man." Then the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some distant place. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us into those pigs," the spirits begged. "Let us enter them." So Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. The herdsmen fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. People rushed out to see what had happened. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons. He was sitting there, fully clothed and perfectly sane, and they were all afraid. Then those who had seen what happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs, and the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. But Jesus said, "No, go home to your family and tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful he has been." So the man started off to visit the 10 towns of that region and began to proclaim the great things Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed at what he had told them.
Thanks, Beth. And thanks for reading from the NLT. I deliberately wanted that version this evening because I think it just uses picture language and words that help us to really get a sense of just what was unfolding in that incident. What does that teach us about evangelism? What does it teach us about evangelism being a priority for us personally and indeed as a fellowship? Well, the first thing I guess we need to understand is the motivation behind it all. The motivation for evangelism. If you take your Bible, it doesn't matter if you're using an NIV, verse 18 is a very important verse in this story. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. There are reasons that you do what you do. Why do you go to work? I guess many a Monday morning you ask yourself that question. Why do I do this? No, just me then, okay. Why do you spend time doing recreational activities? Why do you go home at night? The reason that you do those things is because you have the motivation to do them. You go to work because, well, hopefully it's satisfying, but also, let's be blunt, it will help you financially. It will give you money, and that money in turn can be used to pay bills and buy food, etc., etc., etc. You do recreational activities. Why? Because very often they're nice things to do. You enjoy doing them. They're great ways to relax. Maybe you get around to be around different people. Maybe they're things that you and your family enjoy doing together. And you go home at night because hopefully you love your family and that's where you'd like to be. So, what's the motivation for evangelism? Do you see here in this passage, this guy's life has been totally and utterly transformed by Jesus. I love that picture that he is cutting himself, he's out of control, nobody can subdue him, and yet he meets with Jesus, and this beautiful picture emerges of him sitting, fully clothed, in his right mind, without a care in the world. We're meant to understand from Mark's account that there is a total flip in this guy's condition. He is mad, out of control, a lunatic as he would have been regarded, filled with evil spirits, and yet now, having met Jesus in his own mind, sitting calmly. Now, it's understandable, isn't it, that having had that encounter with Jesus, when Jesus goes to leave, because you remember the rest of the crowd were a bit edgy about Jesus and unsure about him, and so were really pushing him away from their community. And Jesus steps into a boat to leave. But unlike the crowd, the guy who's met Christ and whose life has been totally and utterly transformed begs to go with him. Totally understandable, isn't it? If somebody you met changed your life like that, you'd want to go with them. You want to be around them. Of course he did. And he begged. The picture there is of him begging with all his might to be allowed to go with them. Why? Well, because this guy had a painful past. He had a condition. He'd been through some stuff. Remember what we heard earlier as Beth read to us? They'd arrived on the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes. Jesus climbs out of the boat, and a man possessed by an evil spirit comes out from the cemetery to meet him. The man lived among the burial caves, could no longer be restrained even with a chain, and when he was put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrists and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night he wandered among the burial caves in the hills, howling, cutting himself with sharp stones. And then he met Jesus. He had a painful past. He had a difficult backstory. But he met Jesus. And he went from a painful past to a powerful, permanent change. Meeting Jesus changed everything for this guy. And so we're told, aren't we? When Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him, ran to meet him, bowed low before him. With a shriek he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of this man." And Jesus demanded, "What's your name?" And he replied, "My name's Legion. There are many of us inside this man." And the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them into some distant place. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. Send us into the pigs, and you know the rest of the story. Meeting Jesus changed everything for this guy. This man who couldn't be bound with chains is now comforted, sitting, clothed. Peace had replaced torment. Instead of being driven around by the demons, he's calm, comforted, collected. He's sane, in the possession of his right, rational mind. See, I think the motive for evangelism is clear. It's about wanting to see people changed. Wanting to see people transformed through meeting Jesus. That's what we want for people, isn't it? We love people so much, we don't want them to stay the same. We want them to change. We want them to come to a place where they can be in their right mind. Not worrying about this, that, or the other, but rather focused upon Christ. And so that leads us perfectly to consider the mission of evangelism. It's so simple. Verse 19 is a fascinating little verse. It says, quite simply, Jesus didn't let the guy go with them, but instead said to him, "Go home to your family, tell them how much the Lord has done for you, and how he has had mercy on you." The mission of evangelism is simple. You don't have to be a theologian. All you have to do is tell people. Tell them what? Tell them how the Bible is pieced together over hundreds of years. Tell them what the Graf-Wellhausen theory means for the source documents for Genesis. Tell them what the synoptic problem is all about. You hope not, don't you? No. It's not about that. It's not about any of that. It's not about you. It's not about the church. Mariah's an awesome church, don't get me wrong, but no, actually, it's tell them about Jesus. Tell them about Jesus. And that's the seriousness of this mission, isn't it? It's all about, look, tell them everything the Lord has done for you. Tell them how merciful he has been. Did you sense that as you took communion tonight? Did you sense tonight how merciful God has been to you? See, I think the motivation for evangelism intensifies every time I take communion. Because I do just want to share it with other people. I do want other people to know the reality of what we're celebrating. Did you take communion tonight? Maybe you're not sure about where you stand with God and with faith and all of that. But maybe, in sincerity, you took communion tonight. Well, I pray you'd realize what you did. You took symbols of the body and blood of Jesus, who loves you so much that he would die on a cross for you to make you right with God. It's simple, yet profound. And finally here, I just want us to see in this passage the method of evangelism. Verse 20, again, an amazing verse. The man went away, began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. And all the people were amazed. The man started off. The man went away. It's all about going. It's far more about what happens when you and I leave this place. When we go home. When you go to work tomorrow. When you go and see your friends. It is in the going that we surrender ourselves more and more to Christ. Again and again in Matthew, as Jesus gives the Great Commission, in Acts, as Jesus commissions the apostles, it's about going. Go into all the world. Don't stay here. Go. And so we must go. This service will shortly come to an end. We will have our tea and coffee, and you and I will go home. We will get up in the morning. We will go to those places we've got to go. And this guy went. He went away. And you notice the second thing he did. He surrendered himself. He went, but then he shared. Because it tells us he began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. He shared that with people. When's the last time you shared that? When's the last time you told somebody just what Jesus means to you? And look, if you've got the surrender and the sharing, here's another S for you. He shows. He shows because everybody's amazed by what he tells them. You know, friends, we shouldn't have to be made to feel guilty about not sharing the gospel. We shouldn't necessarily have to be reminded regularly that we've been commanded to tell others about Jesus. We should be motivated. Motivated by the amazing change that has taken place in our lives. Is that true for you? Has that change happened? Doesn't that motivate you? Someone once said, it's not your duty to convict. It's not your duty to convert. It's your duty to convey. Simply put, we tell what happens. And if you have met with Jesus, you can do that. You can tell somebody. You've heard me tell the story of D.L. Moody, criticized by a woman for his methods of evangelism in attempting to win people for Jesus. And Moody replied one day, I agree with you. I don't like the way I do it either. Tell me, how do you do it? And the lady replied, I don't do it. And Moody retorted, well, I like my way of doing it better than your way of not doing it. Friends, 2016 lies ahead. We have unique opportunities to tell people about Jesus. And we're going to seize those opportunities this year. We need to. We need to grasp this. And we need as a fellowship to be mission focused. We need to have a priority that is evangelistic. I'll finish with this story. One day after an evangelistic service, the speaker turned to a Mr. Hines. I'm not sure whether he is of the tomato sauce fame. But he said, you're a believer, but with all your energy, why aren't you up there at it for the Lord? And Hines was a a bit angry, to be honest, and he went home and he thought, who the blinking heck did they think they were? And he couldn't sleep, and at 4 o'clock in the morning he prayed God would use him to lead others to Jesus. And a day or so later he was at a meeting of big bank presidents and things, and he turned to the man next to him, and he just casually started the conversation and ended up sharing his joy in knowing Jesus, and described what Jesus had done in his own life. And his friend looked at him in surprise and said, because I knew you were a Christian and how important that is to you, I often wondered why you never spoke to me about it. And that gentleman became the first of 267 people that Mr. Hines led to Christ. It starts with one. Starts with one. It seems, my friends, that the world is far more ready to receive the gospel than Christians are sometimes to hand it out. If you're a Christian, you possess the greatest news in history. The challenge to us is, are we sharing that? Does what we've celebrated tonight here really impact our daily lives? Does it help us to share Jesus with others? I pray it does. Amen. Well, we're going to finish our service this evening with a song that talks about serving the Lord and allowing his light to shine. Shine, Jesus, shine. Fill this land with the fire.